Well, hello IGA family, it's John here. We're going to be talking about advanced technology. We've got Lee Engelbrecht, who is leading a team that has put together a cool new data intelligence product specifically for IGA. Lee, thank you for being here on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Well, this is really exciting because we're going to talk all kinds of tech stuff, but we're going to do it in a way that makes it really accessible and exciting for the retailers to see, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So, so you and I met as a consequence of some work that was actually happening in IGA Australia. You were at a rally last year, correct?
Yes, we
were.
were.
And you got a chance to see what some of our retailers, we've got 1,400 stores in Australia, were doing in order to have more knowledge about what goes on the marketplace. You saw that and went, hey, we could be a good partner for you in the United States, right?
Yes, yes. Something we've been working on for the last several years, and we just knew that we could just help bring IGA and bring that forward for the retailers.
Well, so we live in an environment today where, you know, no matter what your job is, if you're the CEO of a technology company or you're the CEO of a retail company, right, the knowledge you need to have in order to win at your job today is way greater than it used to be.
Oh yes, yes.
Right.
And it's really making decisions with data and using data to either reinforce that decision or to make that decision much quicker and faster than sitting here trying to just evaluate and say, I think I need to do this or I don't think I need to do this.
Well, there's been in retail in general, and I'm not picking on grocery, but in retail in general, for many years we made a lot of decisions based on either experience or intuition. And often even though our merchandising culture, oftentimes we'd make these decisions based on what we think versus what we know, and that increases your risk dramatically.
Yes,
and it makes it hard to know if you're on track.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been working with retailers. How old is ADvay?
ADvay is actually relatively new. We actually started in April of this last year, officially, but we are an offshoot of several other companies that have been building up and doing this for years. And we have a 7-year history on our staff of doing this work. But I have over 20 years experience in the industry.
So what makes that exciting? I love that you're new, because we constantly have to reinvent in the marketplace, and a new, young, nimble technology company built with experienced technologists. That's exactly what we need in order to make. Because the data in our industry is thick and it's heavy, and there's so much you need to know in order to win. So you had a chance to see what we were doing in Australia, right? You saw that we were analyzing the demographics around a store. We were looking at purchasing trends by categories, big categories. We were looking at media, and you said ADvay could be a great product. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what the ADvay product would be for IGA?
Well, the ADvay product for IGA is taking the data, that is the information around a store, and analyzing that and putting it in a form that is easily read for a store to make decisions on not only advertising but merchandising and also future trending, so they can sit there and say, where do I want to be in 6 months, where do I want to be in a year, maybe 2 years down the road.
Okay, so that's great. So let's talk about the data though. So if I were a store owner, I'd want to know with data, I want to know really, tell me about the audience around my store. So what are their age and income and presence of children and ethnicity. I'd want that.
But even further on that, it's not just age and ethnicity, it's how many people, what is the percentage of Social Security checks in the area?
Right.
What is the percentage of people who are on disability? And how many millennials do you have in your marketplace, in your backyard, as we say? Because we want to own the backyard. If you own your backyard and you know and understand your backyard, then you can expand out.
So I used to do this experience when I was with Home Depot, and you go visit a store, and I'd say, you know, so tell me what's going on in your marketplace and what's good and what's bad. And inevitably we'd get to a conversation on some of that data, and they would say, oh yeah, this is kind of older neighborhood, or this, you know, we don't have that many families with children. And then we'd go back and pull the data from independent sources. We'll talk about your sources in a second. We pull the data and we look at it and go, everything that he said and everything on the sheet are completely different. And it happened over and over again, because these neighborhoods change fast, don't they?
The neighborhoods change fast, and the perception that the store has, and it's not just the owner or the manager of the store, but even department heads. The perception of what they have as a market that's out there is only based on the customers coming through the door. So if you're only getting one segment through the door, you're missing everyone else in the market.
Right. And you can lull yourself into believing that the customers in your store today reflect your marketplace, in a way that they may reflect only a tiny piece of it, and which are the people you don't know about are the ones that are the biggest opportunity for sales.
Correct.
And certainly you want to know who they are. And as you said, millennials or people on disability, boy, those are two different groups that you would market to if you knew exactly how many were in your opportunity set.
Correct. And even not only market, but then merchandise to it, cater to it, and then how do you talk to those people and bring them into the store?
Okay, so if I was a store owner, I could pick up my local newspaper and say, show me the demographics around me, and they'd come in with a presentation, or I could look online at the Census Bureau data, but you're using some different sources. Talk to me about where the data comes from.
So what we're using a data source called ESRI, and they're in over 23 countries throughout the world. They have over 7,000 data points that they look at, and what we're able to do is concentrate on 5-minute, 10-minute, and 15-minute drive times around the store. And that's what we're talking about, owning the backyard. And if you own your 5-minute, and you own your 10-minute, and you own your 15-minute drive time, you'll be very successful as a retailer, and then you can expand beyond that. But we've even found in some of the models that we've done with IGA that some people are doing great within their 5-minute, but not within their 10-minute. And we also found that some in their 5-minute losing customers, but are gaining them in their 10-minute. Again, because they're not matching up to what the market has to offer.
Well, power comes through that knowledge, right? And we'll talk about a couple of those case studies in a second. So, but you also have the capability to use IGA sales data, so store data as well.
Yep, so we have the IGA sales data that we utilize that comes in through Inmar and through that system. And that's not only great for looking at categories, but also once something gets done in store and a change, are we monitoring? Are we coming back and seeing the results? Because that's the other big thing. We can make a change at a store, but what are the results and what happens, and how do we then make those changes?
Well, so learning is iterative, right? So
Yes.
you get a snapshot of what is, you kind of reset your expectations based on this new learning, then you do some behavior changes in marketing and distribution and promotion and merchandising. There's lots of places you could make changes. And then our model here is to be able to go back and then say, given that insight and the changes you made, are we growing your share?
Are we growing your share either in that department or category? And then let's do the next one. And then let's move to the next one. Because by the time you do that 3 or 4 times, the market's going to change again.
Right. So what I love about this, so again, as an ex-district manager, for example, I would go and part of my career, I'd go in and you go into a store, and the store would say, sales are off 2% and new competition, and there's construction going on. There'd be like a series of external reasons why they weren't making their numbers, and often they were legitimate. I'm not saying that they're not.
Some of them are.
But then the next question is, well, what can we do in our business in order to improve? And sometimes the answer to that question is not as clear. With the data now, you could look at it and go, okay, I am, like in your example, I'm doing great pulling away, but I'm actually missing some shoppers that are very close to my store, because in fact those shoppers in this case were ethnic, for example.
Correct.
Or maybe they're older and they're not seeing the media that you wanted them to see. And now all of a sudden I know what play to run, and that's been an important part of this from my standpoint since we first talked.
And that was even the category. They said this category was the one that we win in the marketplace. They're known for that category, they want to win that category, and yet the local ethnicity market, they were totally missing it.
Right. So I'm so excited to be here with you, Lee. We're jumping a little bit forward, but we actually asked some retailers to come forward and work with us to provide some case studies so that we could prove internally that your technology, external data, internal sales data, the combined of it would do some great things for the store. And of course, we're very pleased with those case studies. But let's talk about the model first before we get to them. So you put together a model, and it is an iterative model. It's actually a wheel.
Yep,
right?
It's a 7-step wheel, 7-step process.
And what do we call it? What's our phrase?
It is an IGBOP, an Independent Grocers Business Optimization Program.
Walk through the way that model would deploy on behalf of an IGA store.
It really starts out with looking at the data from the market. And that's what we talked about earlier, owning your backyard. So step 1 is learn your market.
Right.
Okay. Here's the data. So it's an 18-page report plus a summary that talks about the 5-minute, 10-minute, and 15-minute drive time around your store. And we also look at seeing where sales are migrating. Are sales migrating into that trade area? is it migrating on the north side but not on the south side? Because the south side it's migrating out. So now you're seeing where sales are moving within a trade area, within those 3 different drive times. Step 2 is actually a review of the circular advertising. Majority of retailers are still using the circular. 90-95% of their budget is on that print. And so we want to look at it because in order for them to start utilizing a media mix, which is what has to happen in today's environment, whether it's digital, whether it's Facebook, social, and even going to some of the solo mail, it's customized to what's going on in the retailer's market. It is not a standard program for every retailer.
Understood. And so if a retailer's not using print, then it really is how do you optimize your digital advertising or other resources?
How do you optimize it? And then if they have loyalty, then we can look at it. Loyalty is how is it targeting where your digital is going. Step 3 is where are you at, not only from your store, but also the competition.
Right.
Okay. And when we look at that is we develop a market share for you, a 10-minute drive time market share. And then we also look at how you are doing against the competition, whether it's a Walmart Supercenter, whether it's an Aldi, whether it's other grocery stores and even dollar stores. Because not every Walmart Supercenter is the same. Not every grocery store competition is the same. There are stronger ones and there are weaker ones. So where do you fit, and then where is your competition that you need to fight against? Step 4 is where we actually start breaking down the departments, and we look at the departments and the categories and subcategories in 2 ways. Consumer spend is actual dollars in the marketplace.
Right.
And we actually take those dollars and we look at what you're doing and we give you a benchmark of where you could be at for sales. And then we also look at consumer market potential,
right,
which is an indice. And then we set up those indices against the national average, and then we look at your departments that way.
The word data gets used all the time. And if you ask for data, today it's easy to get data, and data will come at you overwhelmingly. But what we're talking about here is giving you some reference points to say, tell me if I've got it right, your store, you're doing pretty good in deli or in meat or produce or whatever, but you've got more opportunities in your fresh area than you thought. And
correct,
let's go after that. And so that data now builds an action plan for them on merchandising for the key areas of the store.
Correct. And that's where we get into step 5, which is let's create the plan. Let's do something to make that change happen.
So we've talked about this. This is very important to me, right? I don't want somebody to come just drop and say, like a consultant, here's all your problems, go have fun with that.
Yes.
We want to stick with the retailer all the way through. And this plan says, if this were your store, here's some sample actions I would take in order to shore up a weakness or take advantage of a strength.
Correct. We build that plan with the retailer. What we don't want to do is we don't want to make them change everything 180 degrees.
Right.
What we want to do is be able to enhance what they're doing and say, if we now move this way, or we talk this way, or we communicate this to the consumer, it's going to help you.
I've got my store. I'm now getting a picture of my marketplace with facts, not suppositions, right? And those facts are based on new and fresh data and my own sales data. I've got a picture of how I'm reaching customers, and so that now I've got an action plan, and I have insights on how to do that smarter.
Now you have a plan.
And now I've got a merchandising analysis and a competitive analysis that shows me where I should attack in the plan. Okay, what's step 6?
Okay, step 6 is go and execute.
Right.
Okay, and you can execute. You can use your Red Oval partners. You can use your wholesaler that you're working with, or if there's things on there that you want us to help you with, we will, to get the plan executed. That's the biggest thing. Get it executed. Step 7, I'll jump right into it.
Please.
For
I was
you.
going to
Step
ask.
7, and this is the biggest one that I love, is we come back and we look at your 3 months worth of sales and we give you a monthly report, and after 3 months we sit down with you and say, okay, here's what happened. And we check with you. Did you fully execute? And if you fully executed and you received these positive sales increases or margin increases, depending on what the goal was, then we were successful. And then after that, then let's go back. Do we go back to step 2 because you made major ad changes, or do we go back to step 4 because you want to now attack another department? So that's the recurring program that we have of how to increase sales and use data for your decisions.
I'm a technology guy, and I love making decisions on math as opposed to emotion. And we make a lot of decisions in this industry, sometimes on emotion, but so coming out of it, There's a reason why it's a wheel. It's a wheel because it's iterative. So we come back and we take a look at it and go, okay, all of these things work. Let's do more of them. This thing, maybe we should have changed the medium more aggressively, whatever. And you build an action plan and you build an action plan and go forward. Over time, the ability to analyze the market and this thinking about using the data, some of that responsibility shifts back to the retailer, right? They begin to, if we're successful, they change the way they approach problem solving.
Yes. Yes, because they'll ask for the data and they'll look at the data and then also look back and say, what is my opportunity with it?
Right.
Okay, and that's the biggest thing is what is the opportunity, what is the data saying, what is my market saying, and then how do we execute it?
The plan that comes back for the retailer, are we talking about, you said it was in a multi-page plan, is this is this kind of like an MBA report, or is this like step 1, 2, 3, go do this?
So we want the plan to be able to read so they understand why the decisions are being made. So we reiterate some of the key findings on the earlier steps, and then we go into the plan that says, here are all the multiple steps.
So at IGA, we do an assessment 3 times a year. We send secret shoppers in, and they score the store on cleanliness and merchandising and all these attributes. You get a snapshot about the store. And if your snapshot comes back and says it's better than it's ever been, and it's even going to get better next year, they'll get a spider chart that shows them attributes, where they are relative to norms, right? The problem with an assessment is that that's what it is. It's your report card. There's your report card. And if your kid gets a C, it doesn't say what they need to do in order to improve the C unless you read the little teacher notes over at the side. And in our case, the teacher notes are the product.
Yes.
Here's what you do to go from a C to a B, from a B to an A, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and that, I absolutely love that. Okay, let's talk media, all right?
Okay.
So we live in a world in which the consumer is increasingly shifting from traditional media to digital.
Yes.
This is a fact, right? And if you look at TV ratings, if you look at newspaper subscribers, if you look at all these media, radio listeners, right? Those numbers are way off what they were at their peak, and they continue to show declines relative to the same period last year. So if you take that line out, it gets more grim for many of those traditional retailers in the future than it was. That's a fact. Second thing is a fact is our industry is still spending in print like it was 1975.
Correct.
And some of that's driven by a co-op, right? So there's a mechanic to get your claim back, and some of it's driven by ad units. And of course that print ad is very efficient because everything in your store keys off of it, right? That's the day you put the signs up, and that's the day you change your labor, and everything keys off this one event. And so giving that ad up, even if the audience gets smaller, is sometimes really hard because it's worked into the system for more than just its advertising.
Yes.
And yet, if you pulled every one of our IGA retailers in a room and said, do you think you should still be spending in print at the levels that you're doing today, none of them would say that they should, right? Which is why so many of them are banning it.
Correct.
So one of the outputs we expect to happen out of this right now, we expect this would be true, is this going to come back and say, it's okay to let some of this print go, or you should be redeploying your print in this new way, and that we do believe in most instances they're going to save money on their advertising cost. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. There may be an instance where a retailer ought to spend more money, they could get more sales. But in most of the analysis that you've done, and we'll speak on case studies, most of them it comes back and says you could safely turn this wheel back here, and that might free up thousands of dollars a year for you to spend on something else.
Yeah, we find ways that we can reduce that print dollar or print spend, and some of it's going to be a major cut, some of it's going to be just trimming off and where we shave, and it all depends on the market and the consumer and what the data is showing. And it's all data driven.
And it might say plus up the print in this zip code over here, but over here you're wasting your time because
we traditionally, roughly about 85% of the time, we find savings. There is about 15% of the times where we do find holes. You know, where you could have print here and here and here, and right around your store you're not delivering it, or to the north of it, where that's where all the customers are coming from. So 15% of the time it may increase, but majority, 85% of the time, you're going to see a savings.
Right. Now that's kind of a snapshot in time, right? So effectively, as the marketplace changes, retailers will have to redeploy their dollars in some new way. But what the newspapers have been doing, and it's very clever, is they've been artificially keeping their print numbers up through something called TMC, total market coverage. They might go under a different name in different markets, but what they've been doing is, if 50% of the people no longer subscribe, then they still print those 50% and they throw the copies around for free. And your research, my research over the years has shown that the response rate from people who get something thrown in their driveway they do not want versus people who actively subscribe is not the same distribution.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. It is not the same consumer. It's not the same person.
But the point is that using data now, instead of just like jumping in, we've had retailers go, I'm just going to kill it. I'm just getting out of it completely, and that always frightens me too. This is a sensitive and a thoughtful approach to making decisions, how to redeploy dollars which aren't generating return into areas where they will.
And that's really the whole thing, is where are you getting your best dollar for your advertising spend? And can you get $5 for each dollar for advertising, or 10 or 20?
Right. So it's fascinating. We're having this conversation here very close to Thanksgiving. And on Thanksgiving, there'll be the traditional enormous, in a major markets, the big, Thanksgiving, all the circulars and the rest of it. And we used to protect those with, that had to be super secret and under lock and key, and there was a chain of control at Home Depot, or only so many people could know what the front cover items were now. And today, all of that information has been out. The Black Friday ads have been out in digital for weeks, and now the retailers are letting it go in digital, because what have they found? There's more audience seeing it online and then waiting for the newspaper to drop on Thursday. So it is so fascinating to me watch the industry go through this transformation. I think for us, Lee, the challenge for a retailer, because they can go get data a lot of places, and they're wholesalers. Many of our wholesalers have programs where they will do a market analysis, and they're very good tools, right?
Yes.
The thing that attracted us to you is that we're not selling a data product. We're really selling a partnership product, right? And it's a systematic decision tree that helps you to make smarter decisions using data. So it's an education product too. And IGA education is part of our DNA, and it always has been. Is that an accurate description of what you do?
That's a very accurate description. We also look at it as that we are doing this for the benefit of the retailer.
Right.
So every decision we're making is this going to help the retailer?
So this is your business. You're an owner. You're a private company, right? And you're speaking to owners of their businesses, whether it's one store or 200. It doesn't matter. We're all kind of looking at this better. And no business person ever wants to make decisions without good information. That won't be the hard sell. The scary thing will be that I might get a report back and it's a bunch of information on it that either it's too expensive for me to do, or it's too complicated and I do not have the time to work this plan.
It's supposed to be very simple for the retailer. And I'll give you a great example. The initial report you get is 18 pages, but you also get a summary with it. So if you are the kind of person that wants to dive in and look at every single line and see that and spend the evening doing that, you can. But most store owners are going to look at the summary and say, you know what, this is the information I need moving forward. And so how do we make this easy to execute and easy to implement so they have better sales, profits, and margins?
Now we asked some IGA retailers to be guinea pigs for the for the tool, and we had several retailers that worked with you on the program. Without kind of betraying anything that went on in those retailers, what are some examples of findings you found for some actual IGAs?
We did find ad savings for some of them. One we found over almost $40,000 annually of savings. And what that does is, as an annual savings, that actually comes back every year, because that's not money going back to the budget year after year after year. Other ones that when we found savings, $8,000, $7,000 annually, and that is about average, around $6,000 to $7,000
for a single store.
For a single store,
right?
We actually, in one of the retailers, we found a hole, and actually two holes in their media coverage, and they thought, well, we were covering that area. Well, they weren't.
So finding out that you're on the right track, validation of your plan is actually that's still a victory, right?
That's
Especially
still,
in a family business where you can go, hey, Dad, look, I'm doing okay. It's actually
I'm
all right.
doing the right thing, and it makes sense. A couple of the retailers thought they were actually doing much better than what they were when they looked at the market share. And when you're doing 20 and 30% market share, that means you have 70% of the market is going somewhere else. And if that's in your 10-minute drive time, you have a lot of customers that are going right by your store.
So I know all those retailers were very enthusiastic about. Certainly, he want, if you're saving $8,000 or $40,000, that's still money straight into your pocket. Or you can redeploy it on digital or other things, and they were all excited about that. But I think, in talking to the retailers that went through the program first, they were all really excited about a new way to make decisions in their business.
Yes.
And who doesn't want to feel smarter? Right.
Yeah, and that was the other thing too. Like a couple of them said, this not only validated a couple decisions, but again, my perceptions were X, but the data is showing Y, and I need to change that. I need to look at that.
So if a retailer wanted to go in the program and say, I'm ready to go, how long does it take before you get to some recommendation steps? How long is the process?
Again, what we said is try to make it easy for the retailer. So we actually have it set up so when a retailer signs up, it's real easy. They sign a form, give us permission to talk to some of the different vendors that they work with, especially on the advertising side. We want to make sure everything's above board and we have permission. Once they sign that, we go to work. We actually do steps 1 and 2, we do them together, and then after about 4 to 6 weeks, we'll sit down, we'll call the retailer, and we'll have a half-hour meeting with them, reviewing steps 1 and 2 at the same time.
So a retailer could sign up here in fourth quarter, which is so busy, and they could be having a January or February meeting with you to plot out a course of how to change 2020 without being worried that they're distracted away from running their business short term. So the retailers that we used were part of the National Retail Advisory Board, and that's a collection of retailers that we asked to serve as an advisory back to IGA. And so they're the ones that went through, most of them went through the program with you. I know that they were all very pleased with the results. We're going to make, for those that want to take calls, and most of them will, want to take calls from other retailers, we'll make them available to act as sort of an internal case study that you can reach out to. At the rally this year, you're going to be at the rally, and we'll be able to showing some of these case studies and show the data, so retailers will be able to see it there. And then we'll make sure all the contact information, if a retailer wants to learn more, will be in the show notes so that they can see it at the end of it. They'll all be on IGA.com so that anyone who's curious can learn everything that we're learning as a collective family.
Awesome. That sounds wonderful.
All right. Well, so Lee, thank you for doing this. This was great. I'm really bullish on it. I'm really excited about it. There's always a risk when you start going down the path of data, but you've built this tool for us in a way that I'm just very, very pleased. And I don't think it's in competition with anything that they are doing today. I think it's actually complementary with many of the tools.
It's just going to enhance what they're doing.
Yeah, I would expect that most of our retailers would be very happy with the results. So, IGA family, thank you, Lee. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.